Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the 51st and best episode of the Hashcast. And as always, I have a guest way cooler and way more interesting than myself. And of course, way more handsome, Manny Pérez. How are you, buddy?
Those are all lies, but I'm doing well.
You know how often people tell me that, like that I am a liar just because I introduce people?
Because you're overly nice and I feel attacked.
Yeah, no,
but
there's no such thing as overly nice for my amazing guests every week that take time out of their busy schedules to talk to me for an hour.
I suppose that's a pretty American thing to say. Like, you're being too nice, but
yeah,
I'm doing
Canadian.
well, dude. I'm happy to be here. It's been a while since I've seen your face, so
yeah,
always
been a while.
I'm down for any excuse.
It's an interesting story because I've known you for quite some time, but for people who might not know exactly who you are, Manny, who is Manny Pérez and what is it that you do?
Yeah, as you said, my name is Manny. Currently, I'm an associate community manager at Bethesda. Before that, I did some podcasting, some content creation, sort of like an indie. I don't want to say journalism because I'm not qualified for that at all, but I did a little bit of writing, interviews, that sort of thing. I've been working in sort of the tech industry for about 6 years, and now I'm here. Yeah.
Pretty cool, Bethesda. Like I wore my Bethesda shirt.
I love
just
it.
For this interview.
That's a great shirt.
Not true. I've been wearing it all day. It's basically pajama at this point. But it's such a nice shirt.
It is
got
a
it
good
at
one.
E3 2016, I think. So I want to talk to you about a bunch of things because like we've met. We've been kind of on the same path for quite some time.
Yeah.
And recently we also went through the same shit. Like we had regular. Basic jobs, and then we got laid off, and then we turned that around into working into the gaming industry, which for a lot of people is like the ultimate goal. Well, not the ultimate goal, maybe. So I kind of want to hear about your path, because you said like you were doing podcasting, content creation for a while. How did that get started for you?
Yeah. So like I said, I worked in the tech industry for, I guess at that point it was like 5 and change years, and I loved it. It was really cool. I kind of landed in the tech startup space by accident. I live in Washington, D.C., and I moved here right after college, and I was like, I'm going to work in politics. I'm going to change the world. And then I got here, and I was like, wow, I changed my mind immediately. And I was looking for some temp jobs at the time, and I just landed at a tech startup that needed some extra help. And that kind of took off. I became totally in love with the idea of working at a startup and kind of, hustling for your own success kind of thing. But then about like 5 years later, I was super burnt out. I was tired. I went through some really bad jobs that I didn't like. I went through some jobs that were awesome, but the startup, fell apart and doesn't exist anymore. So I kind of ran the whole gambit of tech jobs. And it's kind of funny. I think it was 4 years ago, I was sitting with a close friend of mine, Laura, who I actually worked with at that first tech startup. And I don't know what we were doing. I forget where we were, but I remember we were talking about video games, and I remember saying, I'm going to work for Bethesda one day because they're local, they're here. I'm going to do that. And then I just kind of put it out into the universe, and I did nothing to get there at that point. But it was about a year and a half ago, close to 2 years now, that a coworker of mine at my last tech job, whose name is Matt, we kind of we did that thing where it's like, oh yeah, one of us mentioned something about video games, and the other is like, oh, you're into video games. Okay, what do you play? And we kind of did like the, show me yours and I'll show you mine kind of thing. And then we were both like, oh my God, we both love video games so much. Let's be best friends. And that's kind of how it started. And then on a whim, I think he was the one who came up with the idea. He was like, we should like record something. Or maybe he was like, I've always wanted to do a podcast. And I was like, I don't know how to do it, but I'll learn it. I like talking. And that sort of took off, and I called a friend of mine from college, another close friend of mine, Steve, who you know, and I was like, hey, man, a coworker and I, who you've never met, want to do a video games podcast. Do you want to be a part of it? And without hesitation, he was like, absolutely. And that's sort of where it started. We didn't know what we were doing. We kind of just didn't have a format, and we started recording, and then things kind of picked up. We ended up bringing on 3 more people to do some writing and join in the shows. We ended up going to, the PAX events, and it just, I fell madly in love with it because it was like, it was the startup feel of like, this is mine, this is, ours, and we're working away at this, but it's the intersection of something we all love very much. It was funny because like we were all on the outside and we didn't really know what we were talking about, but you put a microphone in someone's face and suddenly they're a thought expert, right? They're a thought leader. So it kind of just took off like that. And, at the job that I was working at, I got to work from home a lot. So that afforded me a lot of time to do editing and stuff, during lunch or maybe not during lunch. And it was awesome, man. I look back on that super fondly. They're still doing super well. They're crushing it right now. Everyone should check them out. They're called the Plus One Player Podcast. It's a great group of people doing great content. And it kind of took off from there. Yeah. So it just was like, I don't know. I don't know if that's a unique podcast origin story. I feel like it's just like, hey, we're bored and we like video games. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. Well, it is like, I think what's put aside, like the origin story is often the same. Like people really wanted to talk about video games and putting something in the world. I think where the path diverges is people who stick with it, and people who like get a certain level of success. Because there's the big ones that we all want to be, but there's this whole middle segment of small content creators that are just having a blast and putting something unique into the world. And I think that is a very comfortable space. That's where I like being in. Of course, like I don't want to be one of the big guys, obviously.
Right.
but like that's the dream, right, for everybody. So you got in that space because I saw you at PAX East. I think it was 2017. It's been a while.
I think so. Yeah.
And what I like about our story, how we became friends was, I think it was at the What's Good Games panel.
Yeah.
Either you or Steve were asking a question to the panel, and that question just resonated with me like so much. I was like, oh man, I'm dealing with the exact same problem and that kind of stuff. Yeah,
so that was. I'm pretty sure that was me, and I'm pretty sure I was extremely hungover.
Could be. Well, because it is PAX.
It is, right. Yeah. And I think, I don't know, I think that was the second day or something because I went like way too hard the first night and ended up drinking
Day
too
zero,
much.
baby.
Yeah, but I remember that. The question I asked was like, how do you do it? And I remember I sort of gave an explanation. I was like, I have this podcast with my friend Steve. He's over there. And how do you get to where you guys are? And I think Andrea Renee gave me a little bit of shit for plugging my own podcast at the time. But I remember that fondly. And then we met at the meetup. Yeah.
And it's, I think, what's so nice about a convention like PAX is like you get to learn so much because afterwards I saw you at the bar and we started shooting shit and talking shop, and that's how we grow. And now I'm still doing this. You had to drop out of your podcast because of the job. That makes sense. But what was your favorite thing, because we're going to talk about your new career, which is super cool, but what was your favorite thing that you did while you were still being a content creator?
Man, I loved the video stuff. I loved just getting in people's faces and asking them questions. I the first video I did was actually at that PAX, and it was during the development of the Messengers with the Sabotage folks. I have their shirt framed behind me because I just love their work. But I kind of finagled my way. I didn't even have a media badge or a press pass or anything. Through a friend who did, he hooked me up with the what's it called, like the interview scheduling slot or whatever. And I signed up through what's the Jen from I'm totally blanking on their name. They helped launch the Messenger. Pop Agenda. That's right. Yep. And I kind of pushed my way in through there, and I got to sit down with Thierry from Sabotage and just kind of let him tell his story, and that was awesome. I mean, particularly he and his team are incredibly inspiring because it was just like a childhood dream that they had of like, we want to bring this sort of feeling of being a kid again and playing these retro video games. And so just like hearing that and being able to share that story was really cool. And then we actually did a follow-up interview when they launched at PAX West. And I loved doing that video. That was a great video to do. So I really liked the interviewing stuff. I obviously loved, being on the podcast and helping edit it. I was obsessed with like editing every cough and every sniffle and everything. And so that was it was almost like meditation, you know what I mean? Just like zoning in on some good content and just being proud, being proud of the content that you're putting out and knowing that at the very least, the stuff you put out is the very best thing you could put out. When we would have meetings every other weekend, and it really came down to us being like, look, let's not do 1,000 things at once. Let's get really good at the podcast thing, and then we'll do this other show, or we'll do this other kind of podcast. And so, just the content creation thing, there's a lot to be proud of, and that was a really good feeling.
Yeah. And like, here's the kicker to it, I guess. So you do this on the side. It's a passion project. You have a day job. Then all of a sudden, the rug gets pulled from underneath you.
Yep.
You have nothing. You have a lot of time all of a sudden to do the podcast and get really good at that. But then you were like, oh, you remember when I put it into the universe that I was going to work for Bethesda? Like, how did that come along? Like, how did those stars align? Yeah. That you just felt like you could go for it?
Yeah, it was this crazy sequence of events. So I got, it was the... so PAX West was the beginning of September, if I remember correctly. It was like September 3rd or something like that. And I got laid off in the beginning of August, I believe. So thankfully, I got like a week or 2 weeks of kind of a heads up that things were going to fall apart at the company I was working for. And then I got that notice. I got the final notice like, look, man, we're closing your, we're closing essentially your department. I manage the market here in DC. We're closing it, and this is your severance, and that's it. And it actually it's weird. For a young person, I've been laid off twice in the last like 6 years. And that's just a product of working in the tech industry. So part of me was like, you know what, man, I've done this before. I'll be fine. Last time I did this, I landed on my feet. It was great. I mean, it wasn't great. It was awful. It was shitty, but I figured it out. And so this time I was at this weird crossroads because I was like, do I just throw myself back into the pool and work for another startup that might not exist in 3 years and grind real hard and burn out and, be somewhat unhappy? Or do I double down on this thing that at the time had no monetary stability, had no guarantee. And like you said, we were sort of in that like lower third of like, we're all doing okay and we have our tiny communities, but we're not making money. We're not, IGN isn't looking at us and looking to acquire us or anything. So I was at this crossroads and I sat down with a really close friend of mine. His name's Sam, who had actually started a company here in DC. And they were awesome. It was a design firm. They were really successful. And I was like, hey man, let's grab some coffee. I'm at this, and I think I said something along the lines of, I could use some guidance, or I'm at a crossroads or something like that. And he texted me back and he's like, oh, I hope this is a good thing. And I didn't want to I didn't want him to think something awful had happened. So I was like, I got laid off. I just wanted to chat about it with you. And he was essentially like, you have to look at the pros and cons and you have to check the boxes and say, do I have enough money to give this a go for a couple months? Do I want to get more money? So I'll just throw myself back into the workforce. Like he kind of presented me with these options. And that was super helpful for me. And I'm really thankful to have had that conversation. And then it was about a week before I was heading to PAX, I believe. And I was scrolling through Twitter at like 11 at night. And I was like, man, this is tough. I just spent a bunch of money on my flight to Seattle. Spent a bunch of money on my PAX badges. I booked a wedding for a friend. So I was just like, man, my money's looking real not around, I should do something. And I had actually just moved in with my girlfriend in this apartment. And so I'm like, shit, I really got to make a decision. But then I was like, you know what? I've been planning for PAX for months. This is going to be like my last thing. And then I'm going to buckle down and put my nose to the grindstone. And then as I was scrolling through Twitter, I saw this woman named Katie Teague. She works at id Software. And she tweeted, something like, we're hiring, check out the positions we have available. And I was like, well, I think last year I applied to like 4 or 5 jobs at Bethesda. And I was like, whatever, 6 isn't going to hurt me. So I go to the careers website, I log in, and there was a position for associate community manager. And I was like, well, that's interesting. I think I had applied for a community manager position previous to that. But this one really stood out because it didn't have that one line that's like must have, X amount of years publishing,
18 years experience,
AAA title. Yeah. And I was like, oh my God, this is like, a needle in a haystack. So at midnight at this point, I'm writing another cover letter. I'm combing through my resume and I'm staying up late to get this perfect. And I send out that application. And I immediately, have this sense of like excitement. And I'm generally like a super hypeable person, so I'm like, oh man, like this is huge, I'm so excited, like I feel so like this is a position for me, I know it. And then you go back the other way and you're like, well, 1,000 people think that, and 1,000 people are going to apply, et cetera, et cetera. And then I ended up going to PAX and kind of trying to push that out of my mind as much as possible, given the circumstances. And I went to Bethesda Days, and I was like, you know what, man? Like, this is like, I need to make some kind of connection. I need to connect some dots here. Mm-hmm. So I approached one of the community managers at PAX, like right after he did a panel, and I was like, hey, I'm Manny. I'd love to like learn about your story, and that's something I really like doing, especially like when job hunting is being like, tell me about you, tell me what you did to get here, tell me what your career path was like, and people like talking about themselves, and so he kind of just chatted me up, and he was super genuine, and I'm incredibly thankful that he even took a minute just to chat with me. And then I kind of, I went to the bar and I got a drink or a little bite of food, and then I came back to another community manager, and I was like, hey, my name's Manny, tell me about your story. And so I kind of did that 2 or 3 times, and it was great, and they gave me a lot of valuable information, and we had a blast at PAX and did some great interviews, et cetera, et cetera. Come back to DC, jet lagged and tired, and I just start messaging and emailing different, the people that I had previously met at Bethesda Days. And so for me, it was like, how many dots can I connect for myself so that when my resume passes over somebody's desk, they can be like, that was a guy I think I know. Yeah, like, I think I remember that guy. Oh, yeah, he bothered all of us at PAX when we were really busy. And one thing kind of led to another, and, people who were super nice to take the time out of their day to even acknowledge me gave me a chance. And it was actually the review I did for the Messenger and the video stuff that I did for the Messenger caught the eye of one of the hiring managers, and that kind of, led to this. I guess that, that's boiling it down, but it was like this weird sequence of one thing after another. And that kind of brought me here. Yeah. Yeah.
That's so cool, though. And you've been doing this for, which is 6 months?
It's like 6 months. I think it'll be 6 months exactly in about 2 weeks. So getting there.
That is awesome. Like, I just love that story because it shows like the part of the hustle, that everybody needs to do. I think you take it to another level to put your name out there.
Thank you, dude.
Because you're not wrong when you said like probably 1,000 people applied for that function. Because for so many people, it's like it's the dream job, right? Working in video games and getting it done. But I think because you were a content creator before, do you think that helped? Did you talk about it in your interview at all, or like you said, the video caught someone's eye? Like, did they bring it up, saying, "Oh, you're a good guy for video"?
So one of the people that I was interviewing with was like, "Yeah, I actually read your review of the Messenger before you were referred to me." And I was like, oh my God, like that was like such a sense of validation. And again, it's crazy because for me, watching the folks at Sabotage work on their game and build the Messenger out of that love and that passion, it just resonated with me. And man, Thierry's such a great guy and his team is amazing. And so it was really cool for me to be like, wow, I put a lot of love into that work and that got recognized. And then he was like, yeah, I wanted to interview you before you were referenced, and now here we are. And so that was like, oh shit, like that's validation served to me on a nice plate. So that was really cool. Yeah.
That is also, you're now an associate community manager for what games are you working on?
So I'm working on Doom, the upcoming Wolfenstein games, and Rage 2 as well.
Just a small couple of titles.
I don't know if you've heard of those, but there are these 3 indie titles that are coming out. It's really exciting.
So how did it feel the first day walking into the office?
I was terrified. And it's funny because it's in Rockville. That's public information. It's in Rockville, Maryland, which is like an unassuming suburban kind of town. And living in DC, where it's just like constant noise and hustle and people, and then like you're in Rockville and there's just nothing happening around you. So I'm walking down this like actually really pretty street, and you see the ZeniMax sign, and I'm just like, what the fuck is happening? And I remember it clear as day. I was listening to the Overwatch soundtrack for some reason because it was like pumping me up, and it's like that crescendo right when like it's essentially the loading screen music of the game if you've ever played it. And I was like getting chills, and I'm really thrilled. And I get there, and I'm being sort of toured around the building, like this is getting introduced to people, and I'm just like, well, this is fucking crazy, man. and then like learning the games that I'm sort of assigned to be working on. I mean, Wolfenstein was the first shooter I ever played. It was amongst probably the first 5 games I played in my life. And Doom as well, and Quake. I mean, I'm not working on Quake, but just to kind of be a part of that was like, oh man, that was wild. And it's, you know, I love the things that id Software does. I love the things that Bethesda do. And so it's still surreal. There are absolutely moments where you're just like, what? Have they figured me out yet? When are they going to kick me out of this club? But yeah, the first day was crazy. It was a lot to take in.
Yeah.
Yep.
I get it. I can imagine. It is so. I just, like I said, I love you so. That's why I want to talk to you, because it's like making your own luck. Like you're living that dream, and you. I love it when someone calls their shot. Like one day I'm gonna work at Bethesda.
Yeah. And I think it's to sort of clarify. I don't think it's like a strategy thing, right? Like, and I think just kind of like putting it out there into the world, and it doesn't. You don't need to tell people. You don't need to put it online. It just to yourself, just to be like, this is something I want to do. And I often joked, but it was kind of serious too. I joked about the podcast that I was working on as my Trojan horse, and I was like, one day I'm just going to push this thing into the industry, and I'm going to jump out and be like, "Ha! You hired me, tricked you. Now I'm here." And to put that into motion was really exciting, and it was like kind of this like secret little plan I had for myself, even though it wasn't secret. But and you used the phrase "making your luck," and I think that's exactly it. A lot of, you know, I went to a lot of panels at PAX and different industry events where they're like, well, there's a certain degree of luck, and I think luck is part of it, but in order to get to that lucky place, you need to, you know, spend the money to go to PAX. You need to buy your media badge. You got to get in people's faces and say, I'm Manny. What do you do? You know? And so I think building your luck is like the perfect way to put it, because you won't have that opportunity to get lucky unless you shove yourself into that opportunity. Yeah.
Well, I think for people who are listening to this or watching this, like, I think your story is something that they can, like, you can't copy it. You know, you can't say, okay, I'm going to do exactly everything that Manny did, that I'm going to also end up the job. But I think you can draw some inspiration from it, and to like we just talked about, like creating opportunity for yourself. Sure. Because people often ask when I put it out, and I get any questions for the guests, it's like, okay, what are the tips and tricks to get into the industry or get where you are? And I always say, like, you need all the things. Like, you need to set up, everything needs to look good, but you need to spend a little money too, because
that's true.
It's not going to come by itself. And you know, you need to advertise not just your product, but yourself, and that might be even more important, because there's a 1,000 podcasts out there and even if you don't stand out audience wise, it's a great thing to reference to. Like, yes, I am comfortable talking to camera, and yes, I do have my own small community. Because if you can manage that, it looks a lot better on a resume than when you have nothing at all, right? So, like, people can look at you and think, okay, Manny, cool guy, I'm gonna take a lesson from that. But who were your people? Like, if there were people that you looked up to that helped you ignite that drive?
For sure. Yeah, I mean, there's so fucking many, but I think I can kind of like look at these different, like, I don't want to call them tiers, because I'm not like putting one above the other, but like, categories is maybe a better way to put it. I think of these different categories of people. I think of a person like Pete Hines, right? He's in this category of like, in a lot of ways, he is the connection that a lot of people have to Bethesda, and I fucking love that dude. And seeing him being able to, I mean, first of all, he's been with Bethesda forever, right? And so he knows it very well, and he knows the people, and I think just him being kind of a man of the people really resonated with me. And so that's like one category, right? And then I look at a guy like Thierry from Sabotage, right? He's in a category of like this dude that just created this thing out of this passion and out of this hustle. And I look at him and I'm like, holy shit, he had this idea, and there's this quote that I will never forget. He was like, I asked him, what do you want people to feel when they play your game? What do you want them to take away? And he said, I want people to feel like they're a kid on Christmas sitting in front of the TV with their shirt over their knees playing a new game. And I was like, holy shit. Like, I almost stopped the interview because I was like, let me put that in a poetry book. Because I was just like, that's amazing. Like, that's such a personal thing that he has. And he wanted other people to feel that. And then he like full circle just did it. And like, and, you know, I had that feeling when I was playing that game, playing the Messenger. So I really look up to people like that. And of course, just like the people that are putting in the time and effort into their own communities, people like you, people like, you know, the people I worked with at Plus One Player, people like OK Beast, etc. Like those people who give a shit about community, because that, you know, people say like always read the comments, always respond, and you know, maybe you don't want to respond to every comment, but knowing who your audience is and knowing who your community is and having something that they appreciate is like having a fucking superpower. And if you don't appreciate that superpower, and if you don't capitalize on it, it's like, you know, with great power comes great responsibility. I have this memory of one of our like biggest supporters of the Plus One Player podcast when I was with that team was this guy. He went by FaZe, and he lived in Norway, and he worked on a ski mountain in Norway. And I don't even know how he came across the podcast, but he was such a big supporter, and he supported us on Patreon. He shared episodes with his friends. There's this one picture he took and he posted to our Discord, and it was a coffee mug, and he was holding a coffee mug on this like porch overlooking just like, when I think of like Norway, that's exactly what comes to mind. Like it was just snowy mountains and green trees. And he was like listening to episode 31 on a beautiful morning. And I was like, what the fuck? Like this guy is you know, a world away in a different place, and he's listening to us. Like, okay, that's why I'm going to stay up until 1 a.m. to edit this podcast. And so people who are doing that, people who are really like, people who understand that, that community is incredible. And I if I am ever to start my own company, which I don't know, maybe I will, maybe I won't. I'm a huge believer of people over process. And this is something that, again, my friend Sam told me. He was like, when I started the company that I started, when he started this design firm, he was like, the process will come into place. It doesn't mean you should ignore it. It doesn't mean you should pretend like it's not important, because it is. But if you have the people with the right attitude and the right vibe, and the right vision, I guess is a simple way to put it, they'll build the process. So like, you know, you can't really jam a square peg in a round hole. You can't have a process and then just try to jam people into it. You got to start with the people. And so I think the teams and the individuals who recognize that, those are the people that I look up to, because they're doing it right.
Yeah, no, that's great. That is great. So it's so funny because now you talk about how important community was when you were doing podcasting. Now you are responsible for community probably times like, I don't know, 1,000, 5,000.
It's big,
for a community manager, for people who might not know what a community manager is, can you give us a quick description of what your job looks like in a regular day?
Yeah, it kind of depends, but in like super duper simple terms, it's getting people excited about a game, and sort of guiding them on the hype train. Which again, like I love getting hyped about things. I'm very easily hyped. For like the last Mortal Kombat trailer, when they used the original theme song from the movies in the 90s, I wasn't planning on buying that game, and that came out, and I pre-ordered it day of, because like I was just like, this is amazing. Like, so I'm very easily excited, and so I get to do that with people and like get them excited about things, which is awesome. And you know, that's done through social, and that's done through streams and different kinds of content, and then so that's sort of like the before a game comes out, and I actually haven't been part of a full launch quite yet. Rage will be my first in less than a month. So right now we're like in the hype phase and get people excited and answer the questions they might have. And then what I imagine and what I've been told is that it then turns into a reactionary process where it's like, okay, what are people having problems with? What are people more excited about? How can we capitalize on that and help them celebrate this game? What questions do they have now that they're in the game? You know, do they want certain, do they have feedback, you know, feature feedback? Do they want certain things to be added to the game? Like, how can we listen to them? How can we respond to them? And continue to just sort of engage with them. So it's kind of this, I don't want to use the word binary, but it's like this two phase, I guess, like get people excited and then keep them happy and answer their questions and keep them excited. So it's kind of like a two-part process. Yeah,
that's good to know. Well, they clearly got the right guy for the job.
Well, I mean, definitely when a game launches, that'll be my real test. So we'll see.
So you've been doing this for 6 months now. I know it's still a little too early to talk about like the full experience. Like you said, like you're launching your first game, you haven't had the full cycle yet. But what was the thing that made you go like, wow, I can't believe this is like real. This is like my job right now.
Oh man. Yeah, there's been a couple of those. I'd say one of the first ones was my first. This sounds petty, but it was really exciting for me. My first tweet from like a game account. It was the Rage 2 account, and it was actually on the same day that Pokemon Let's Go was launched. And so the tweet, I made a GIF of somebody throwing somebody else a grenade and then the grenade blowing up in their hands. Yeah. And the caption I wrote was "Gotta catch 'em all," and I was really proud of that one. And so I was like, "Oh man!" And I was really nervous because it's like, "What if I spell something wrong? What if I do something?" You know. But it all worked out with that one, and so that was cool. And then it just like, you know, having meetings with these people that I've adored for so long, and like the first time I met Hugo Martin was like earth shattering for me. And he's just the nicest individual, and he's really down to earth, and he's also really, you know, excited about things. And so like just kind of geeking out a little bit with him is amazing. And so I would say those two were pretty big for me. Yeah.
That is pretty sweet though. I have to talk shop with you just a little bit because I also run a couple of Twitter accounts now all of a sudden. So when you made that first tweet, did it do well? Did it blow up?
It did pretty well. I think it did. Oh man, I'd have to go back and check, but I want to say it did like maybe 2,000 likes and a handful of 100 retweets. It was pretty timely. I think that one just kind of landed in my lap, and obviously I had kind of like studied like the kind of humor that those accounts, you know, had sort of established beforehand. So I was like in tune with how the Rage 2 account, like what the tone is. And fortunately for a game like Rage 2, if anybody's not familiar, it's just like an off the wall fucking crazy, insane, wild adventure. And so like that's a really fun account to you know, that those social media channels are just a lot of fun. And so, I think it did pretty well. I'll go back and check. I'll figure that out.
I believe you. But that's fun because I have the same thing right now, right? Because there's a world of difference. What I found was having your own Twitter account and you can just shoot the shit and whatever sticks. It doesn't really matter, right?
Yeah.
And then when you start doing this professionally, people start paying for you to be hilarious on the Twitters, then all of a sudden you have to craft a tweet instead of just shit posting, right? How did your brain make that switch between like, okay, now there are stakes, like how because I find it interesting because your creativity gets tapped in a slightly different way. Did it feel like that for you too, or how did that process
work
out?
I think before, I don't know, when I was doing my own stuff with Steve and the rest of that team, it was more like, how do we promote ourselves? How do we let people know that we're thought leaders, even though we weren't, right? How do we like establish ourselves as somewhat, you know, a group of people and content that's worth listening to? Whereas, you know, when you think about social media for big brands, whether it's, you know, Rage 2 or Nike or you know, whoever else, it becomes like, what is the tone of this brand? Who do we resonate with and why? Where can we inject humor in it when appropriate? Where can we dial it back and address more serious things when appropriate? So you know, I work somewhat closely with people in brand, and so it's interesting to hear what they have to say because you know, they're kind of the shepherds of the brand, right? And so I think just being in tune with how a brand speaks, you know, knowing the difference of like, how do people perceive the Wolfenstein brand compared to how do people perceive the Rage 2 brand, right? Yeah. That's super important, and like the tone of those games. And if you play the games, you know it. You know what I mean? Like the last Wolfenstein was gritty and emotional and violent and passionate, and so like those are, you know, if you were to like do a word wall or I don't know what, those are the words that would come to mind. Whereas a game like Rage 2, there'd be some different words, right? So just being familiar with that and knowing that audience is key. But it's a different kind of pressure for sure.
You can't go to school for this. Well, I guess you can in a way, but then when it starts to become real, it's like sometimes, because some of it, like you said, it's very reactionary, right? You gotta you see this opportunity for a great tweet that might be an hour maybe. Do they let you just do it, or do you still have to go through like, can I not do this kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I don't know how much I can share, but I will say that I feel equipped to sort of come up with my own approach to things, obviously staying within the parameters of like how again the tone of the brand, right? I'm not going to be like LOL shooting Nazis. So like I think understanding
Pete can do that, but you can't yet.
Right.
Yeah.
I think understanding those parameters is like really important, and then you can kind of flow within those parameters. And again, sometimes things resonate way more than others, and sometimes you think you have lightning in a bottle, and everyone's like, "No, this isn't lightning. This is milk."
That's good. It's just like I just love to because I'm so happy for you that this all worked out for you.
Thank you, dude.
Because you deserve it so much. So you're associate community manager now. It's always hard when you're in a new job to say, okay, this is going to be next. But like, what would you, now that you have that, well, not the foot in the door, you're like in the building at this point. Like, what are the things you would love to do, or because all of a sudden there's opportunities for you, and I know you've always been like an advocate for like diversity in gaming and all that kind of stuff. Is that something? Like, now we have this new position. How do you feel? Like, what else are you going to do? Because I know you're a guy of planning and putting shit in the universe. I'm kind of curious to see what is starting to tingle in the back of your mind now that you're there.
You're like tap it. You're like, what? Yeah. Get out of here. What are you? What's the next thing? Yeah, that it's a really good question. I think to your point about diversity in gaming, that's something I'm still super passionate about, and I see these, these organizations that focus on that sort of thing, and I absolutely love the work that they're doing. I would love to love to help that in some way, whether it's like speaking on a panel about Latin people in gaming, or helping do a charity stream or something like that. I would love to do that kind of work as well. And I think there's those sort of nebulous goals, like I would love to help this group of people, or I would love to do this kind of work. And then there's more tangible goals, like one that I have for me. I have a goal that before I leave Bethesda, in whatever capacity I do, I would love to speak at whether it's like a QuakeCon or an E3 or something. I would love to be on stage and be able to represent Bethesda in that way. That's something that more recently I've been like, this is my goal. This is this is where my goalposts are right now. And I'll continue to do the work that I have to do, and I'll wait for that opportunity, and I'll try to capitalize on it if and when it comes, and we'll go from there. But that's a goal that I have. It's weird going from tech startups and sort of my own sort of hustle to a fairly large organization. I've never worked for a company that's over 50 people until Bethesda. And so it's a different world, like there's so many overlapping teams and people sort of working together. So I think I'm still in a handful of ways trying to figure out, what I would like to do next, and how I want to sort of showcase my skills and try to just help Bethesda in the ways that I know I'm good at. But yeah, I mean, there's a handful of different things, but I would say, getting on stage and helping people get hyped about something would be awesome. You can bet that if we see you on stage in the next 2-3 years, probably, I am going to be obnoxiously bragging about, like, I got him on the show when he just. This is when he cracked his plan, and then he tripped on stage, and look how far he's come.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be great. But it's cool. So, what do you have? Like, I know you're not gonna. You have a couple of launches. What are you most nervous about when you're in this job?
Yeah, I think I'm nervous about launch. I'm nervous mostly, like, it's gonna just from what I hear, it's gonna be crazy, and I think there's so much good being done at Bethesda, and I want people to see that. And I want people to be like, wow, like a lot of people put in a lot of passion and love into this game, or into this showcase, or into this, live event or whatever. We do streams sometime from Bethesda, and so like I always get nervous before that. I recently did a Morrowind stream, even though I don't work directly on the BGS titles, like Fallout and Elder Scrolls, etc. But they needed somebody to be on a stream because everyone was somewhere, and I forget where they were. Oh, I guess it was PAX, actually. It was this most recent PAX. And I was actually approached by the other associate community manager who works in the BGS game. She's like, hey, have you ever played Morrowind? And I was like, no. Yeah. She's like, will you be on a stream and play it with me? I was like, yes, absolutely.
That is so cool.
Yeah, that was like kind of nerve-wracking. And I think like I'm surrounded by people who are just fucking good at what they do. I work directly with, under, and next to like some amazing people who are like killers at their job. They're really good, whether it's the community people, the brand people, or the artists. And so there's definitely it's cliche, but that imposter syndrome, being like, oh, like how do they approach this piece of work? Okay, let me see like how I can sort of emulate that in the work that I do. So there's this constant, at least for me, I'll speak for myself, it's not a doubt thing. It's more of like how can I again showcase the skills that I know I have, and that's just inherently a nervous thing to consider on a day-to-day basis. But I do love the work, and so it totally balances out. Yeah.
And on the opposite of that, like, what do you think? We probably covered some of this. Like, what do you think you're so good at that you're like, yeah, Bethesda, this is what I'm bringing to your company.
Oh
now.
Man,
or are you too like gentle and polite to brag about yourself?
I don't think I'm gentle. I don't know. I don't think I would describe myself as gentle. But I will say, I love getting in front of people and talking. It was cool. That was, something that I thought a lot about before my interviews. I was like, if they ask me the question of like, what are your strengths? I can't just be like getting in front of people and talking a lot. So I was like, how do I say that without saying it? And I think just like it means a lot to me to be able to like see the people I'm talking with and seeing their reactions and getting them excited. And so like, I think, I don't know, I'm sure there are probably more nuanced ways to go about it than go around the office being like, hey, if there's any opportunity for me to talk in front of people, sign me up, boss. But, I wish I could do that. I hope that one day I can be like, I'd love to, I'd love to do this thing that involves me standing in front of people and talking. So hopefully one day they'll let me, they'll let me off my...
Give you the mic,
yeah. Just like let me run wild and hopefully shout a bunch of people into getting excited about a game.
They're pretty cool. So, have you ever been to an E3 before?
I haven't actually. No, I haven't. Not yet.
Okay, so it's the new one coming up. Are you going to be around? Or are you going to
TBD? Still figuring that out. I hope so, but we'll see.
Yeah, that would be great. Like, I hope I get to make it out this year because we get to hang out.
Yeah, that would be so awesome.
How's it? I'm not sure. Like, let me know if you can't really talk about it. Like, I know, like, it's starting to be crazy times now for a lot of gaming companies heading up to E3 because there's a lot of planning that I don't want to come into because it's probably way too difficult to explain. But how does the hype feel in an organization like Bethesda as part of the team? Like, oh shit, it's E3 because you have all your secrets that you're not going to mention. But like, how can you capture that? Like, how can you explain what does hype feel like from that side?
I think one of the things to know and was like extremely comforting for me was that everyone I work with like fucking loves video games, right?
Yeah.
And everyone kind of has their flavor, right? Like some people are really into the retro stuff. Some people are, especially the BGS folks. I mean, they're obsessed with the BGS games, the Fallouts, the Elder Scrolls, etc. Some people, I have my own little Dark Souls crew, right? We naturally seek each other out in the wild. And so it's cool because, we're working on these games, but before any of that, we were gamers and we loved video games. And so being able to work on things and still be hyped about them is a unique thing. I think, you kind of go through like a honeymoon phase of any new job, whether it's something you've been working for a really long time or something you look at as a stepping stone. And like, I can't see any version of this timeline I'm in where I'm like, man, like, yeah, I remember the honeymoon phase of when I worked at it. Like that, for me, I feel like that'll never end because I do love the games we're working on. I do love the history of these games, and so the hype leading up to E3, it's there. I mean, it's palpable. Yeah. People are getting excited. We're preparing a lot of exciting things, but we're also excited about like other games and like other things that are coming out. And like I have a close friend who I work with, who's like almost, actually I would say she's more obsessed with Kojima than I am, which is I didn't think was possible, but she actually has a Metal Gear Solid 3 quote inscribed on the inside of her wedding band, so I'll give her that one. But and so we're like constantly theorizing about Death Stranding. We're like, oh, when's it going to come out? And so the hype is there, man. Like it's it's no different than if you just like walked into a room full of gamers and was like, hey, who's hyped for E3? Like everyone would raise their hand. So people are excited. I mean, it is crazy. It's busy. And especially, you know, for someone like me and the handful of people that I work with that are also working on 3 different titles like that, you know, that's crazy to be able to switch back and forth. And it can be stressful at times, but you know, at the end of the day, we get to help promote and get people excited about video games. Like, fuck, man, that's great, you know.
Yeah. Have you gotten over the shock yet of like seeing like secret stuff that you would have no idea about from the outside?
A little bit, but not by a lot. And you know, it is part of the job, and I treat it as such. And but there are amazing things happening, and you know, as someone who was just a consumer less than 6 months ago, I'm like, holy shit. That's amazing. And then you know, I'm like, oh, okay, you know, business, but it's exciting. Every day is exciting. Yeah,
it's cool. I had the same thing. Like day one at Evolve, and I was like reading shit. I was like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Business face.
Exactly, and that's the thing. You know, it is part of your job, but I'm sure there was a little bit of shock when they were like, all right, this is your first day out. Here's all the secrets. And you're like, whoa, like show me to my desk. Like, yeah.
That's
for
cool.
sure.
So like we talked about like everything that's already mind blowing. Like you have so much in front of you, like 6 months in, first launch, first E3. Do people be like, okay, are they like prepping you for this kind of stuff? Your coworkers, like, okay.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of like they're I wouldn't say they're prepping me. I would say they're telling me about their experiences, which like I guess is prepping me. But it's really you know, I drive to work with a coworker. We drive about, you know, it's like an hour each way, but we're just constantly talking about you know, he's been with Bethesda for almost 3 years, and so you know, he'll tell me about his experiences at these events or leading up to them or after them. And, you know, all I can do is, you know, sweat profusely, but also get really excited and try to pull insight from where I can. And it's a learn by doing kind of environment at times. They're prepping me as much as they can, but there's a lot that I feel like they might not be able to, you know, they can tell me about the thing that's going to happen, and they can tell me the processes of the things of how we handle those things. But like at the end of the day, you know, we'll do what we need to do. And then when it hits me in the face, I'm like, oh, this is that thing that somebody told me about 2 months ago. Time to do it, you know? So I think it's a learn by doing case. And I prefer that. That's the kind of environment that I probably thrive best in, because
trial by fire.
Yeah, and there's so many details, you know, like I can only retain so many details in here before I'm just like, let me do them, and then I'll be good at it. So
well, it's pretty cool. Like everybody I've met from Bethesda are always super nice,
for sure.
So I'm sure you fit in just well there. So you briefly mentioned like you just moved in with your girlfriend a while ago. Is she working in tech, or does she have affinity with games at all?
Yeah, it's interesting. She doesn't have a super close relationship with video gaming, at least until like I showed up. So she doesn't work in tech. She works essentially in higher education. She works for an executive search firm. So, you know, colleges and universities will go to her company and be like, hey, we need a new dean. Help us find, you know, a list of candidates. So they'll do the sort of hunting.
So what I want to know is, can you explain your job to her?
That's a good question. I think, you know, it's funny because like I will reference things. So I'll be like, yeah, you know, I'm working on this thing and I had a meeting with this person. And then she'll like out of her memory be like, oh yeah, that's so-and-so who does so-and-so, right? And I'll be like, how the fuck do you know that? And she's like, you used to talk about them all the time before you started working with that. And I'm like, oh yeah, I did talk a lot about that person, didn't I? Because I'm obsessed with their work. And so like she has a really good mind for like understanding like, you know, before I started working with Bethesda, it was like all hype. And now like that hype is put in different compartments. It's like, you know, Doom work hype, Wolfenstein work hype, Raids work hype. These are the people that are involved in each game and the processes. Or, you know, these are the things that I'm excited about. And now she can be like, oh yeah, like I'm sure she connects some dots and can understand. There's more structure to my hype. It's not just me like shouting, you know, on a rooftop about how excited I am.
Yeah, that's what I like so much about what we do. Like when you do community manager stuff and social. Like my wife called me the other day. She had a bad day at work and she was driving home. It's kind of venting, And she was like, so how was your day? I was like, so we just had a 20-minute meeting about if we should talk like a cat or not in a press room.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, it's like, and there's a lot of ways that our work is similar to other industries and similar to other, to even, you know, my girlfriend's job is very different from the kind of work that we do. And then there are days where she's like, yeah, we had to go through a bunch of resumes of candidates and we had a 2-hour meeting on a Saturday. And I'm like, yeah, we're you know, I thought a lot about if I should include the word fart in a tweet or something like that, right? So like there, you know, there's varying degrees of overlap and then complete opposites. Yeah.
Yeah. If you would go back, like to younger Manny, like I'm not sure how old you are. You look like a 25-year-old sometimes. Like
that's very kind.
Yeah. Let's say teenage Manny, was he already like obsessed with video games and everything?
Yeah,
or did it come later?
I think there was kind of like one of these, whatever you call that shape. I think growing up, you know, it's kind of fitting. It was just the original Game Boy's birthday, I think 2 days ago. That was my first experience with video gaming, was playing. I got an original Game Boy when I must have been 4 or something, or 5. And I was super into it as a kid, and I played a ton of Wolfenstein. I would say all the way up until maybe the GameCube era, I was like a hardcore gamer. And then my parents just like didn't buy me consoles anymore, and so I kind of fell off a little bit. And then I would say I didn't have a console. I had a PC in high school. Excuse me. And so I played some online games like the Halos and such. And then probably in college was when I came back to it, because I would, you know, I remember being at parties and people would be like drinking or dancing or playing, you know, beer pong or whatever, and I'd be in front of the Xbox, right? And so I think that's probably when it came back. And then it kind of just kept going from there, and there were games that I super loved, and then you know, I always have like a background game that I come back to every now and then, and I feel like that's been the case since probably the beginning of college was when I picked back up.
Yeah. So say 10 years ago that Manny would look at Manny today, would it be like mind blown how you got there or where you are right now?
A little bit, yeah. I think, yeah, especially like college Manny. I was like, I can't wait to move to DC to work, you know, on Capitol Hill, and then, you know, future me would be like, hey man, great tweet about, you know, Pokemon. And then college Manny would be like, what the fuck happened? Is he okay? You know? But no, I think it's a weird thing, because, you know, I don't even have an idea of what I'll be doing in 10 years from now. Hopefully it's something cool, but, you know, again, as somebody who gets really passionate about things, you know, maybe in 10 years I'll be really passionate about, you know, flipping houses or something. I don't know. But, you know, I want to like leave myself open to opportunities to be passionate about things. But I think it would be pretty cool to talk to 10 years ago me. I'd have more hair and less of a beard, but other than that, I think, you know, I would hope that 10 years ago me would be okay with where I am now.
Yeah, that's pretty. I'm pretty sure they would be thoroughly impressed. Whatever Manny you're going to talk about, in whatever phase in your life.
Well, I would hope so.
Yeah. So man, yeah, I have a segment, and I don't think I've ever explained it well to anyone before. But I kind of like to capture like who you are as a person.
Yeah.
So I have a season, like, what did you put into the world that made you feel like I made the world a better place? It doesn't have to be about your job, doesn't have to be about podcasts. It's just in general, like, what is the thing that you're most proud of that you ever done or created? This is like loose from everything. This is like a completely new conversation.
Okay.
Timestamp it. Like, this is Manny making the world a better place.
Oh, wow. Man, that's a great question. Shit. I don't know. I think there are moments where I feel like I've done some good, and there are moments where I feel like I've done. Oop! I bumped my mic. There are moments where I feel like I've done like big picture good in a small way, and then there are moments that I feel like I've done small good in a bigger way, if that makes sense. So, for example, like when I like to go home for the holidays and hang out with my family, and when I, every year I take my little sister out for breakfast one day, right? And those are my moments of like small scale, big good. You know what I mean? Like, she's about to go to college, and I feel like that's our moment to just kind of be like, wow, fucking parents, am I right? Like, it just kind of relate to each other, and like, kind of strip everything away, like strip the bullshit away, and just kind of like be really close friends. And so I think those are a lot of the big, good, small scale things come out when I'm with my family. You know, I consider myself super lucky to be with my girlfriend. She's a wonderful person, and so just being able to spend time with her, it always feels good. And that's like I feel like her and I are collectively producing good by just like being you know, happy people together. And then you know, I think it's an interesting thing thinking about like, you know, where and when you're bringing good into the world. And I think it's less of like hey, these are all the moments where I've put good into the world, and at least for me, more of like this is my trajectory, and this is where I hope, you know, my good is coming from. But I got to tell you, like there are days where I feel I am luckier than I know what to do with. And I feel like I gotta give back a little more, just because like you know, there is that process of, like I said, building your luck, and I own that. You know, I'm very proud of the work that I've done in that regard. But at the same time, like I know a lot of people, some of them are friends of mine, who would love that kind of that exact same opportunity. And so I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I should just like, I don't know, donate all my shit. I don't know. Like I do feel like my balance of like lucky to how much good I'm putting in the world could probably be tipped better. But I don't know. That's like a weird self-loathing deprecation thing. But I think there are opportunities to do good in a lot of different ways. And, you know, we used to occasionally, because we didn't have a lot of money, but when I was doing the podcast thing, we would just buy games and give them away to the listeners. And so there's been, I think the last game I gave to someone was Red Dead 2. And I gave it to someone who I knew would fucking love it. And he was like, holy shit, like, this is awesome. Thank you so much. Like, and then just like celebrating those people as part of our community meant a lot to me. And I hope to do that with Bethesda, you know, find those super fans and be like, hey man, you know, anything from like, here's a t-shirt to like, you know, let's hang out, let's get a beer or something, because, you know, that means a lot to me. And so I hope there's more moments like that in my life.
Yeah. I think it's a perfect story. Like I love that story about having breakfast with your sister, because those are creating memories for a lifetime for someone.
Absolutely.
That in the moment doesn't look like much, but over the course of a lifetime, it can be such a powerful thing. Yeah. And I think for you, it's interesting because you wanted to be a politician, you wanted to like change the world. And even though you didn't end up doing that, I think what you're doing now is you're still bringing a lot of joy to the world, and that in a way can be very powerful, because you never know what kind of politician you would become, right?
Yeah, maybe I would be that asshole that's like, more guns, please. No, I wouldn't be that guy, for sure.
No, you probably wouldn't. But like in measurement of putting good into the world, you might do more good now than.
Sure.
Like I had this whole conversation with my mom the other day. Because she flew in, and we always have deep, meaningful conversations. And we only see each other one week in a way. There's no branching path. Like there's only one Manny that went through life. So I think you ended up in the right place, and I think we're grateful to have you in the gaming community, and we were lucky to have you in the podcasting community as well.
Well, thank you.
Because I think you've done a lot of good already.
I appreciate that.
I always end a bit on a part of self-promotion, but you know, you're with the big guys now, so I'm not sure you have to promote anything for Bethesda, but feel free to do so. But more importantly, like, where can we find you if you're listening to the show? Like, hey, I love this Manny guy. Where can I find him?
Yeah, you can find me. I'm on Twitter at IamJitsu, I believe is my Twitter. I changed it like right around recently, when I started working at Bethesda, actually. So you can find me on Twitter. I don't know. My DMs are open. Say hi. And don't be racist. That's all I got to say.
There you go.
I'm promoting
that's a good
anti-racism
shill right there. Yeah. I like that. I like that. Well, thank you so much, Manny, for logging on today and talking to me. I should probably promote myself. I am the Hashtagonist. In case you're listening like randomly and you don't know who I am, this is the Hashcast, and this is a show where weekly I will interview cool people like Manny and many other people that I've had on the show so far. 51 episodes in.
That's awesome, dude. Yeah, I'll join in on that promotion. The Hashtagonist is awesome. He's a close friend, and everyone should fucking listen to his content. This was awesome. I'm, like I said, any excuse to see your face and hang out with you, man, is
I hope our paths cross again in person, because that would be fantastic.
Likewise, dude.
But like I said, thank you for coming on the show, and if you're listening or watching this, thank you for tuning in every week and listening to me ramble and having guests that have meaningful stuff to say. and as always, I cannot close my show, but I'm gonna do it anyway. So hopefully you'll come back next week with another guest. I don't know who it is yet, but we'll see. Have a good night.